Okay, did you enjoy the discussion? And cake and coffee already? Okay, let's start the final session. The next two talks is related to somehow combination of AI and neuroscience, I think. And the next speaker is Professor Yukiyasu Kamitani, coming from Kyoto University. And he's going to talk about deep image reconstruction from the human brain. Kamitani, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Yuki Kamitani, and I'm here at Kyoto University. Okay, and I joined this Shitsukan project since the start of the second term, 2015, and this term will end soon. And I really enjoyed interacting with a group of people, and especially I'd like to appreciate the Nishida-san's initiative and the leadership. And partly thanks to this project and activity in this project, we are able to have these distinguished Shitsukan researchers in my department at Kyoto University. Actually, that's one of the biggest achievements for me. Okay. So my proposal in this project was to build a data-driven approach to study neural Shitsukan representation. Okay, so Shitsukan has been studied using very controlled visual stimulus, changing parameters, or using more verbal expressions. But I thought more mid-level representations between physical light attributes and more semantic ones are very critical components of Shitsukan. By the way, Shitsukan can mean many things, but in my study, I use Shitsukan to refer to something that makes an image more realistic. Okay. And to study this mid-level features, we used deep neural networks as data-driven feature generators. Okay. And we compared deep neural network and human brain activity measured by fMRI, and these are connected by brain decoding. Okay. So then what's brain decoding? This is basically to translate brain activity to the content which is being represented by the brain activity. Okay, in this case, this brain activity is representing this one, this stimulus, and from this brain activity using as input to this machine learning decoder, we decipher what's the content. Okay, so we often use simple linear decoding of machine learning models combined with Bayesian sparseness priors. This is partly because brain data tend to have relatively small number of samples, like hundreds or thousands samples, and also because by using this linear simple model, it becomes easier to interpret the results. So we can only detect linearly decodable features as neural representation. Okay, so we usually we train this model using stimulus-induced brain activity, and then decode, in this case, the orientation of the stimulus. And once this is learned using stimulus-induced brain decoding, this can often, although not always, generalize to the situation where this subject is having the same content as imagery without any external stimulation. So this is possible when stimulus brain activity and imagery or subjective experience induced brain activity shares the same representations. Okay, and using this idea, my group has been studying low-level and high-level visual representations. A low-level example is this visual image reconstruction by decoding local contrast in the image. So in this 2008 study, we decoded the local contrast in this very coarse 10 by 10 binary images. Okay. And this is the high-level example, which is to decode dream contents by decoding semantic categories. Okay. So in this SCAN project, we wanted to study something in between. And to study this, we decided to use deep neural networks trained with many, many images, millions of images. And in most experiments, actually in the following results I'm showing today, we use pre-trained neural networks, which is trained to detect visual object given visual images as input. And we expected that there are many, many units in each layer, and that may contain something relevant for Shitsukan or some brain's neural processing. Okay. And we use many different models, but mainly used AlexNet and VGG models. And this is example from AlexNet. And we can visualize what each unit in the trained neural network represent by optimizing the input stimulus so that the unit's activity is maximized. So if you look at the lowest layer, you can see very local, simple, in this case, orientation, like detecting unit. And as you go up higher, more global and more complex images are preferred. And this is somewhat analogous to actual brain. Okay? So we know that given input to the eye, the visual cortex process image input serially, or maybe recurrent or top-down, maybe included. But here, I just simplify to a feed-forward view. So, and it's known that as you go up higher in the visual cortical pathway, more and more global and complex features are detected. Okay, so this is just an analogy, but we can make a more concrete predictions between data from brain to DNA. Okay, so this is what we did in this project. And suppose we have brain activity and DNA activity given the same image input. Okay? And we found that the activity of each individual DNA artificial neuron can be, given an image, can be predicted from the brain activity patterns, thousands of voxel patterns induced by the same visual image input. Okay, and here I'm showing one unit example. So given these many different images, these are test images which are not used in the training. And this black line shows a true feature value of this one single unit at CNN layer 8. Okay. And this gray one line shows the predicted activity. So this is not perfect prediction, but it's significantly correlated. And here, we're using the whole visual cortex covering lower retinotopic areas and ventral areas. And in this figure, we are predicting from more sub-areas in the visual pathway to predict the feature values at the different layers of CNN. Okay. So, And interestingly, lower CNN layers can be predicted using lower visual areas, and higher CNN layers can be predicted using higher visual cortical areas. So the performance peak shifts gradually to the right. So this is indicating that the brain's hierarchy roughly corresponds to the hierarchy of DNN layers. Okay? But this is just showing the average. Each bar indicates average of hundreds, thousands of units in each layer. And there are units which can be well predicted, but others are not good. And here I'm showing the decoding accuracy for each individual unit. These dots corresponds to each unit. And the performance is shown for subject 1 and 2, two different subjects. Okay. As you can see, some are good, some units are good, some units are bad. Okay. And interestingly, those performance correlates between subjects. Okay. So this good, well-predicted units are well predicted for both subjects or for all subjects. Okay, so maybe these well-predicted units are relevant to our brain, not just random chance of performance. Okay, and in an additional experiment, we had the subject to imagine eat something. Okay, given some verbal cue. So given verbal cue of orange, the subject imagine orange for 12-second period. Okay, so it takes some time for the image, so for the imagery to become clear. Okay, and here I'm showing the decoding performance for each layer, and using the whole visual cortex. And interestingly, we can see a top-down serial activation along the hierarchy. Okay. So first, this highest layer is well predicted, and later, lower layer, which seems consistent with the gradual development of the subjective imagery. Okay. And this is when stimulus was presented, all same. So it's expected that it takes time for the feed-forward processing. That's not detectable using functional MRI. Okay, and we have seen performance pattern like this using AlexNet. So given visual hierarchy and DNN hierarchy, so peak shifts gradually. So this represents hierarchical correspondence between the brain and DNN. And we wanted to quantify this hierarchical correspondence. And we came up with an index called brain hierarchy score. And that's meant to give smaller value for these flat performance or these pattern showing not consistent shift. Okay, and using this score, we tested many pre-trained DNN models. Okay, and this is showing BH score in orange, and in gray, I'm showing the ImageNet top 1 accuracy. So this indicates the general object recognition performance of the DNN as artificial system. Okay, and the models we are routinely using, VGG and AlexNet shows relatively high BH score, but this BH score and this object recognition accuracy are not correlated. Actually, it turned out that there's negative correlation. So this means that high-performing AI or DNN and not brain-like in terms of hierarchy. Okay, so to come up with brain-like and high-performing DNN, we need another effort. Okay, so I think this is related to the next talk by Dr. Kramer. Okay. Okay, let's get back to more standard setting of DNN. Okay, and using the decoded DNN features, we wanted to reconstruct the image. Okay, so in 2008 paper, we just reconstructed very coarse 10 by 10 binary images, but we wanted to make it more realistic. So again, we have seen or imagined the image here, brain activity, and from here, we predict the DNN activity, which is likely to be caused by the same image. Okay, and given this, we want to get an image which produce this activity. Okay. So we want to invert this. But there are many methods, but today I show an optimization-based method where we start with some random seed and gradually change the pixel value, okay? So that, this input images DNA features becomes similar to this decoded features. Okay, we calculate the error. So given this, this is optimized, and we calculate this and error is given back. Okay, this kind of back propagation. Okay. Additionally, we used a deep generator network, which is GAN, but this only helped make the image look more smooth. And here I show a video which shows the optimization process. And the left is a presented image. And the right is a reconstructed image starting from the seed. So I think some Shitsukan is here. Or here, maybe you can see eyes and these ears. So this reconstruction does not reach to the exact copy, but still you can feel something similar. I think that's because we are using mid-level features, not the lowest level image level features only. Okay. And these are some results. So these are not very similar in terms of pixel space, but you can still feel something similar. You can feel something maybe related to Shitsukan. Well, this looks like spooky, weird animal. And so these are very different, but I feel something similar between these. Okay. Okay. And here so in the previous movie, we used all layers for optimization, but we limited the layers. This is only first layer, lowest layer, 1 to 2, 1 to 3, to 1 to 8. This is all layers. And we evaluated the reconstruction. And so when it's evaluated by pixel correlation, using just first layer is the best. Okay. But if you ask human raters to judge, the quality gets better and better as you add many layers. Okay. And here is reconstruction using these artificial shapes, which were used in our 2008 paper, even though these artificial images were not used in any stages of model training, but it works to some extent. Okay. And using somewhat different architecture, we were able to more typical Shitsukan like texture like images. Okay. And also, we've been trying to reconstruct internal imagery. Okay? It was very difficult using our previous method, but using our current method, we're beginning to see something. Okay? So we presented this prior to the experiment to the subject, and in the scanner, we asked the person to remember this shape. And brain activity during that was used for reconstruction. And it's not that clear. You may need to use your mind's eye. But I think you see some X here. Yeah. And at the bottom, I'm showing the frame by frame presentation. And around here, maybe you can see the difference between these shapes. This is very challenging, but the more easy one is to study attention. So we presented these overlapping images of this and this. And now, this image is from the time period the person is paying to this one. Okay? And this is switched. Only attention is switched. The reconstruction drastically changes. So our reconstruction is reflecting our internal state. Okay. And finally, we are trying to decode from brain activity during sleep. And so this is time of awakening. And we eventually want to visualize dream contents. So far, we haven't found obvious link between dream contents, reported dream contents, and these images, but we are now seeking the correlation to the behavior or physiological states. Okay, I think this is going to be very useful tool to study the neural representation for a spontaneous brain activity. Okay, just to summarize. So our approach was to use deep neural network as hierarchical feature generator. So I just emphasize that DNN does not need to be really brain-like, truthful brain-like model. So we can use this DNN as a method to generate many candidate features, and we can pick some. And we did the brain-to-DNN decoding, and we can find some DNN features that are very relevant to the brain. And this information may be useful to build more brain-like AI. And using decoded DNA features, we reconstructed images. So it's fun to see those movies, but I think it's not just fun. And I believe this is very important because this reconstruction is an integration of features into a coherent image. Okay? In neurophysiology, people often study each features individually, but we lack the knowledge of how it leads to more coherent perception. And I believe this image reconstruction leads to better understanding the holistic aspect of perception. And also, it's important as a visualization of internal representation, like dreaming. And I'd like to end this talk by showing Shitsukan being reconstructed from the brain. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very stimulating talk. Are there any questions or discussion on the two? No? I have one question. Usually, the AI-based approach or DNA-based approach is applied to the stimulus recognition. Is it possible to apply similar technique to the output dimension, like motor control or response rate yet.
Yeah, if you can find appropriate model in performing a task corresponding to a human experiment, yeah, that would be possible. And recently, I don't know much about motor control, but the people are using recurrent networks to model human decision making or reward learning or something. And yeah, they do similar kind of analysis. So by training artificial neural network, you find some unit is correlated to some animals' neural activity. So I think that kind of approach can be applied to many different modalities.
Okay. Any other question, comment? Yes.
Is your image reconstruction based on individual subject, right? How is the variation of the subject, and is it if it's
yeah, actually, each person has different brain size and shapes, and it's hard to align them. And just by aligning by anatomical landmarks, the decoder doesn't generalize at all. So we are now working on functional alignment methods, which is basically to show some movies for a while, and for multiple subjects. And so assuming that at each time of the movie, the different subjects' brain activity represents the same thing with different code. Okay? So we developing a method to change, translate the code between subject A to B. And it works to some extent, but not as good as within subject reconstruction.
Is it related to the degree to which you can decode the image from the brain activity? The individual difference is correlated with something else?
Correlated with some person's attribute?
The opposite way. The degree to which you can decode the image from the brain activity or something.
Yeah, actually, we have only small number of subjects, and we cannot tell anything for sure. But as for stimulus-induced brain activity, as long as fixation is good, reconstructions are similar. But as for imagery, probably the ability to imagine clearly it matters. So, but yeah, so maybe we need to some screening or pre-test of imagery ability and correlate with imagery reconstruction quality.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next section. Thank you.